Hello everyone and welcome back to Boater Plays Something. Today we are playing, or rather reading, Thera Awakening, the prequel novella to Stonekeep, written by Steve Jackson and David Pulver. We had a good time reading this last time, and really stretching my Scottish accent abilities. So without further ado, let's get started on Chapter 2. That rhymed. Thera Awakening, Chapter 2. Rathe. Someone was calling his name. A woman's voice. But it wasn't her voice. Rathe! Everything was shaking, but he had escaped, followed the rune. No, he was being shaken. His eyes opened. Rathe, can you hear me? I'm awake, he said. Rathe realized he was lying on a wooden bed. Tam was shaking him. Light was shining through a barred window, illuminating her face. He smiled at her, glad to see she was unhurt, although she looked tired and worried. You're all right, Tam said. I thought you'd lie there till the gods returned. She matched his smile, and some of the worry lines vanished, but her eyes had a haunted look that Rathe had never seen there before. How long was I out? An hour? Rathe said hoarsely. He coughed. His throat was dry. A day and a night, Tam said. This is the 4th hour after noon. She looked away. We thought we'd lost you. That long? Rathe thought. He looked around the room. Rough timber walls, a simple bed, a small window, a pair of candles on a low table. Where was this? We're back in Fort Thunder, Tam said. The West Guard Tower. Rathe realized he had spoken aloud. Fort Thunder was a small wooden stockade, one of many built to protect loggers during Stonekeep's seasonal forays into the Vale of Kara. The huge logging expeditions wouldn't be here until the fall equinox, a month away. Until then, they were the fort's sole occupants. He wanted to ask Tam what was going on, but he felt dizzy and lightheaded. His throat felt like a desert. Water, Rathe croaked. Right away, she left. A day and a night? Rathe tried to bring himself up to date. The last thing he remembered was a spiked claw slamming into his head. And then he'd been elsewhere, and something had happened. A dream? A woman's voice in his mind, the great rune burning and broken in the huge temple hall. Temple? Why did he think that? But it fit, somehow. Rathe touched his head. A cloth bandage was wrapped around it. It felt tender. Fort Thunder. Hoth's patrol had been garrisoning the outpost when Orvik had arrived with orders to search for the missing Seth party. Memories flooded back. The battle, Whispering Death, Hoth's orders, the others. He had taken command, but so many had been hurt or killed. How many had made it? At least Tam was still there. Rathe felt a sudden swell of affection for her. Had she died, if they had been anything but officer and soldier, Rathe felt they could have shared a deeper relationship. As it was, he valued her comradeship, and tried not to think of might-have-beens. There was a tap on the door, and Rathe brought his thoughts back down to earth. It was Tam, her helmet filled with water. From the well, she explained. She eyed him. You look better. He propped himself up and drank it gratefully, then splashed some over his face. That feels good. You look better, Tam agreed, saying the same exact thing twice in 3 paragraphs. Welcome back to the living. Thank you, Rathe said. Then he asked the question that was on his mind. Who did we lose, Tam? I saw Hoth fall, and Warren. Tam looked grim. They got Kaja, too, she replied. She never even had time to draw her sword. What about Orvig? Tam shook her head. The Fates loved Orvig that day. He was caught in the open at first, but none of the creatures even touched him. She shrugged. Maybe they don't like the taste of dwarf. Orvig was alive. Who else? Did Dren make it? No, Tam sighed. He bled to death. We lost Calvert. Nam too. It was only a flesh wound, but the poison... Rathe shook his head. So many dead. Poison? And their spikes. Tam took a deep breath and sat down on the bed beside him. Rathe realized she was exhausted. That's how we almost lost you. Some got into your wound. Nam, Calvert, Dren. They'd all fallen after he took command. Maybe he should have done something else, some plan that would have saved them. Only 5 of them were left. Tam, Lorik, Quinn, Orvig, and himself. So few left. Tam gripped Rathe's shoulder. They struck so fast. Hoth first, Kaja and Warren never knew what hit them. After Hoth went down, I thought we were dead. I couldn't even find my shield. They were everywhere. But you took command, got us into that shield wall? Until then, I didn't think we'd make it. Tam pulled him around to face her. You saved us, Rathe. She finished. Rathe shook his head. It was the girl, he told Cam. She said her name was Kel. She warned us. If there'd only been himself and Dren awake, we wouldn't have made it, Rathe realized. They owed her their lives. But who was she? Dren mentioned her before he died, Tam said. She sounded curious. Is that a savage woman warned you? Yes, Rathe said. At least she was dressed like a savage. She wore skins. He tried to picture her face, and it came to him easily. A striking face framed with black, curly hair and flashing green eyes. Would he see her again? I wish I knew who she was. Well, whatever she was, I'm glad for her warning, Tam said. We wouldn't have made it otherwise, if we'd been asleep. She shivered. What'd she call them? Whispering Death. Rathe glanced out the tower's barred window. He could see the walls of the fort, and beyond it the dark forest of Caravale. You've got guards posted? Rathe asked. Yes, Tam answered. We broke out the javelins from the fort's store, but I'm keeping everyone inside as a precaution. Good. Rathe heaved himself up to a sitting position. How many of the creatures did we kill? We got 5 of them, Tam said. The others fled. No sign of them since. I hope they stay away till the gods return. Rathe nodded thoughtfully. They'd killed 5, perhaps 6 or 7 had fled. Once surprise was lost, the Whispering Death wouldn't fight human soldiers 1-to-1. But if there were more of the monsters, staying here would be foolhardy, and Stonekeep would have to be warned. There was a knock on the door. Enter, said Tam and Rathe simultaneously. They looked at each other. Tam gave a faint grin. She'd been in command for a whole day now, and seemed to agree with her. The door opened. It was Lorik. He was holding his helmet and wasn't wearing armor, but he had his sword buckled on and his shield slung over his back. There was a bruise on his temple, but he seemed to have gotten through the fight in one piece. The young soldier broke into a grin. Glad to see you up, sir, Lorik said. He cleared his throat, but Rathe thought he looked healthier than on the march. Lorik turned to Tam. Orvig sent me, said there's something he wants to show you, but I don't think he's in a hurry. Can I get you anything to eat, sir? Rathe looked inquisitively at Tam. Quinn's in the kitchens. He made stew. I've already eaten. Sounds good, Rathe said. He realized he was hungry. Tell Orvig we'll be there soon, Tam told Lorik. The man nodded and left, then returned a few minutes later with a bowl of stew, 2 slices of bread, and a pitcher of water. Quinn served them, then excused himself. I thought we were low on rations, Rathe said, dipping his bread into the stew. This is delicious. We use the monsters, Tam said. They cook up good. Rathe choked, staring at her in amazement. Then he realized Tam was grinning at him. Vegetables from the storeroom, she said, wiping spattered soup off the table. Really? I like that there's a spit take that it didn't actually. Well, I guess the Rathe choked could have... Anyway. Spit take is maybe a little too contemporary for fantasy prose. Rathe laughed. He felt a bit better, knowing Tam could still joke. He finished the stew and rose to his feet. He was a bit shaky, but the dizziness was gone. I'd like to inspect the fort, he told Tam. Then let's go see what Orvig's found out. He found his sword and shield, and together they left the room and climbed downstairs. Tam had chosen the West Guard Tower as their refuge. With only 5 of us, I didn't want to try to cover the whole fort, Tam explained. It's a good choice, Rathe approved. But it was also a good trap, he realized. They couldn't stay here forever. Where's Orvig? South Barracks. Follow me. Tam led him into a fort... Tam led him into the fort's open courtyard. The air was cool, and Rathe couldn't help but... I thought that said but. The air was cool, and Rathe couldn't help but glance nervously at the sky. The overcast of the last few days had broken at last, and now only a few white clouds drifted amid the blue expanse. It seemed peaceful. It had probably seemed peaceful to Hoth before he died. Fort Thunder was a sturdy structure, but Rathe knew its thick wooden walls would avail little against the Whispering Death. The fort's builders hadn't expected winged foes. They crossed the courtyard and ducked back inside, entered the South Barracks Hall. Rathe wrinkled his nose. Something smelled peculiar, acrid, bitter. Orvig met him at the door. Rathe knelt and gathered his stepfather into a hug. "Well, boy," Orvig said gruffly when he'd pulled free. "Finished your beauty sleep?" "I think so," Rathe said. He looked the dwarf over, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "You look like you could use some sleep yourself." "Can't sleep," Orvig said. His eyes narrowed. "Work to do." Jen, Rathe thought. "No, I'm fine, boy," said Orvig, as if reading Rathe's reaction. "But I promised your father I'd take better care of you, and then you go making me a liar." He peered up at Rathe's bandaged head. "It's a miracle you survived the poison." "I know," said Rathe. "I had help." Orvig raised an eyebrow. "We'll speak of it later," Rathe said. "Now tell me what you've learned." He motioned Tam over from where she'd been standing by the door. "Take a look at these." The table was covered with a stained cloth. Upon it lay two of the Whispering Death. One was nearly intact, save for a hole in its eye. The other's carapace had been sliced open, its organs displayed. A scatter of knives and bottles covered the tabletop, next to a jug of water. A roll of parchment lay on the table, covered with sketches. The dwarf had been busy. Orvig had us bring two of them back," Tam said. "Aye," Orvig said. "If you don't know your enemy, you're a fool." Armored in glittering black and green chitin, the thing was too long and graceful to be a beetle. The forelegs were covered with deadly spikes. The head was dominated by green mandibles and glittering, multifaceted compound eyes. Antennae quivered above it. "Looks like a praying mantis," Tam said. Rathe agreed. He'd seen the hungry little hunters sunning themselves on Stonekeep's walls during the summer, but those had been only a few inches long. This creature was 7 feet from head to tail. The scary thing was, it was almost beautiful. "Whispering Death," he said out loud. He searched for the name the girl had used. "Orvig, have you ever heard of anything like it?" The dwarf tugged on his beard, and my goatee will have to be a pale imitation. "The deep library of Stonekeep might have records of such things, or Jen might know. But our clan is the stone melters, lad. We deal in chemical reactions, not in bugs and mutants." "Does that mean you don't know what it is?" Tam said. She prodded it with her sword tip. Orvig slapped her hand away. "It means I'll have to find out," Orvig said. "When we found the hill on which Seth died, we had questions. Did such as these," he tapped the creature's head with his knife, "slay the Seth party?" "Who can doubt it?" said Rathe. "Not I," said the dwarf answered. "But remember the question we asked on the hill? If they were killed by mere creatures, what happens to their good and weapons? And where did the sword wounds come from on the mules? Those questions remained unanswered." "You said remained," Rathe said. He kept his patience. Orvig's lectures were something he'd gotten used to in his childhood. "Aye, lad. Turn the intact creature over." Rathe hesitated, reluctant to touch the death without gloves. Then he obeyed. The thing was light and brittle, cool to the touch, but dry rather than slimy. Tam leaned in closer to see, wrinkling her nose. "What's that on its belly?" she asked. It was a mark of some sort, a complex pattern in red, like a double hourglass. "I've seen that mark before," Rathe said. He withdrew his hand. "On the one I killed." Memory of the sudden terror as the Whispering Death's weight landed on his shield, a desperate thrust to dislodge it, the sword stabbing down as it thrashed on its back. "Is it the same one?" "No," Orvig said. "All of them have it." "So what?" said Tam. "The trail spider that bit my cousin Thera had a red diamond on its back." She pursed her lips. "Lots of poisonous insects have marks." "Ah," said Orvig, "but not like this." He dipped his finger in the jug of water, then touched the mark, rubbed it. It smeared. "Dye?" Rathe asked. Orvig sniffed it. "Blood," he said gravely. "Drawn in blood." Rathe sat down. This changed things. "Could the things be intelligent?" he finally asked. "Perhaps use this as a war paint or something?" "I doubt it," Orvig said. "I've dissected them. And Rathe knew he meant the dwarves, we know that the brain is the seat of thought. The thing has no more brain than a dog, and I think they're clever, but not... The thing has no more brain than a dog. I think they're clever, but not so much as a man." He caught Rathe's gaze, held it. "No, boy. Some intelligence is directing them." Rathe stared at the bloody pattern on the creature. Something he remembered. "It looks like a rune," he finally said. "It is indeed," Orvig answered, surprised. He gave Rathe a long glance. "How did you know?" "My dream, I think," Rathe said. "Go on." said Orvig. Tam nodded. When I was unconscious, I dreamed of a rune carved in black glass, a magical symbol. And I like magic spelled with a K at the end. Magical M-A-G-I-C-K-A-L, and magic just M-A-G-I-C-K. So that's what this does. Since I'm not showing the text, I figured I'd let you know. A magical symbol. It's magic, Tam said. She drew back from the table. Rathe understood Tam's unease. Long centuries ago, magic had been the driving force behind human society, and human warfare. Two rival cabals, the Lord Sorcerers of Atlantis and the Dark Warlocks of Ys, had warred with spells as well as steel. The final struggle had been an exchange of ever more deadly sorceries. The final spell had been cast by the Dark Warlocks. It went out of control, and the result was the devastation, the end of the world. Almost. Continents burned, oceans boiled, and both warring nations sank beneath the waves. Even the gods had not escaped unscathed. Neither the Dark Warlocks nor the Lord Sorcerers survived, nor had most of the rest of humanity. The scattered survivors had taken centuries to rebuild human civilization, even with the help of the subterranean dwarves. Other races were even harder. If the green-skinned Throgs and their smaller cousins, the Shargas, had been civilized before the devastation, they were no longer. And none of the legendary elves and few of the magic-using fairies had been seen since the skies burned. Ooh, Orvig. Since then, magic had been rightly feared. Among the humans and dwarves of Stonekeep, only a few elder magicians... I'm going to pronounce that magicians, even though the K is still in there. Only a few elder magicians retained any knowledge of the old ways. Their rune magics were a closely guarded secret passed to trusted disciples, to be used only for the safety of the keep itself. Or so Rathe had always been taught. Magic, repeated Tim. Right. I'll check on Lorik and Quinn. Rathe nodded. Do so, he said. She saluted, her gaze lingering on him for a second, then turned and left. Rathe saw the effort she made to straighten her shoulders as she strode away. Magic. Here, among them, trying to kill them. Rathe knew he should be frightened, but instead he was fascinated. When Tam was gone, he turned to Orvig. What could the rune be for? Runes are the heart of magic, said Orvig slowly. That much I know. There are other kinds of sorcery. Rituals and such, or elf magic, but they were lost in the devastation. Rune magic is made by scribing the rune you want to use on a rune item, like a staff or a wand, or even a sword. It stores the energy that powers the spell, but the nature of the spell is in the lines of the rune. But what does this rune mean? Rathe asked eagerly. Could it control the creatures? That seems a likely truth. But who could have drawn it? That I cannot say, Orvig said. Each race has its own runes. I can read some dwarf runes and recognize others, though I've not the art of magic. But this is not dwarf magic. Who else uses magical runes? The savage Throgs have their shamans, Orvig said, although their small cousins, the Sharkas, have no such art. The tiny fairies use runes as well, though neither man nor dwarf from Stonekeep has seen their kind in many a year. And your own race? Aye, of course, aye. Human runes are mighty. Orvig peered down at the design drawn in blood. It might be a human rune, he said. I know too little of your race's magic. Human spellcrafters are secretive, just as are the dwarves, of course. Orvig sighed. Knowledge should not be ordered, but suspicion and secrecy still breed ignorance, even after centuries of cooperation. Nah, I cannot say for sure. The rune was drawn in blood, Rathe observed. He thought for a moment. Could the blood have some significance, perhaps drive the creatures to attack things? Orvig nodded. That could be it. Blood has power, certainly. And wait, Rathe interrupted. A terrible thought had struck him. If blood had power... Tem said the Whispering Death didn't attack you. The last spoke true, Orvig said. The dwarf frowned, casting his thoughts back to the battle. One of them flew right past me, though I was nearest it and had no shield. I wonder why... It fits, Rathe said, if the rune was drawn in human blood. The things attacked humans, not dwarves, not animals. Humans. You're not saying the dwarves had anything to do with this? Orvig's tone was low, but his eyes flashed. No, of course not, Rathe said, but think of this. If they were magic to attack only humans, they couldn't have eaten your sister. Jen might still be alive. Aye! The dwarf's face cracked into a grin. That could be, that could be. He suddenly frowned. You'll be planning on returning to the keep with the soldiers to report. I want to find her as much as you, Rathe said, but Stonekeep has to know. Aye, but I'll not go back without Jen, Orvig said slowly. Aye, but I'll not go back without Jen, Orvig said, slowly. He stared at the floor. Not if she may be alive. My duty to family and clan demands it. You can't search for her alone. She's alone. Well. With an effort, the dwarf wrenched his thoughts back to the creatures. But there are other mysteries. He tapped the table with his knife. Tell me, Orvig said. Tell me, Orvig said. What do you mean when you spoke of seeing a rune in your dream? At first I thought I was floating, Rathe began. He told the dwarf of the columned hall with its floor of black glass, the feminine voice that spoke to him, and the rune in the floor he'd followed, even as it had shattered. Orvig listened intently. Was the rune in the dream the same as the rune on the insect, he said at last. Sure, we'll just keep the rest of the paragraph in accent too, why not? Excuse me. Rathe shook his head. No, similar, but the shattered rune was far more complex, more powerful, complete. He visualized the rune, then pointed to the symbol drawn on the creature. This is like a sentence ripped from a page, or a single line from a poem. Does that make sense? Orvig nodded encouragingly. Rathe went on. But the rune I saw, it felt like it was connected to the woman's voice somehow, almost like it was her name. Yet it also seemed somehow familiar, like a childhood memory. Rathe looked up, met Orvig's gaze. And when the rune shattered, I felt like... He struggled for words. Like something inside me had been broken as well. He shook his head. It's silly, isn't it? I have paper and quill, said Orvig. Can you draw me this rune? I can see it in my mind, Rathe said. I'll try. He was no artist, but several attempts and much spattered ink later, Rathe had a depiction that looked right. You're very quiet, Rathe told Orvig. It was true. The dwarf was simply staring at it. Do you recognize it? Orvig nodded, his expression unreadable. Rathe watched as he fished into his belt pouch and pulled out a ring. Now, my dad has a ring that would perfectly fit for this. It doesn't quite have a rune on it, but is like golden with a little black glass in it. The closest I have is this ring of Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. Yeah, there we go. Zoom, zoom. But, you know, it's got the black gem glass. This thing was like $1.50 on Wish. So we're going to use this as our only visual aid for this whole thing. Rathe watched as he fished into his belt pouch and pulled out a ring. The dwarf held it out. The band was of heavy gold. A black stone glittered in it. It's beautiful, Rathe said, but have I seen it before? It felt familiar. Where is it from? What's the stone? Obsidian, said Orvig. Hold on. Obsidian, said Orvig said. Editing. Obsidian, said Orvig. Or obsidian, Orvig said. Volcanic glass. Like, I would guess, the floor in your dream. No, end quote. He held it into the light. Look at the glass. Look closely. The light caught the jewel, revealed the tracery of fine lines carved on its face. The rune in the temple, Rathe exclaimed. But where? It's your mother's ring, Orvig said simply. He offered it. Here, take it. Put it on. Rathe accepted the ring numbly, his thoughts in turmoil. His mother, his father, he had never known them. A week after his first birthday, both had left the keep, never to return. He knew his father Clave had been a logger and later a soldier, that his mother Ray had been a healer. I'm going to pronounce that Ray. R-H-E-A. I'm going to go with Ray. He'd been raised by Orvig. When he grew older, he had learned that his father had once saved Orvig's life, that a mutual debt of friendship existed between them. His adoption had been Orvig's way of repaying that debt, but in time, bonds of genuine affection had grown between the dwarf and the human child. How can this be? Rathe asked. He held the ring in his palm, weighing it. It was surprising. Book's in the way. He held the ring in his palm, weighing it. It was surprisingly heavy. I don't understand. Aye, nor do I, boy, said Orvig. Not entirely. But knowledge aids understanding. And I've kept you in the dark for too long. He took a drink of water, which gives me the perfect excuse to do so as well. I know you have questions. Ask. How did you get the ring? What does it have to do with my father? Little to do with your father, said Orvig, save that he would not abandon your mother. What do you mean? The dwarf almost seemed not to hear the question. He shook his head slowly, and his reply was no reply at all, but another question. What do you know of the gods? Orvig asked. Only what you taught me, what everyone knows, Rathe answered, surprised. We're gonna get some backstory on the gods in the world in here, which affects the game, though the game didn't do quite as good a job revealing backstory, which is part of why this is such a thing. Anyway, the gods. The beings called Light and Darkness created the universe. They were the eldest gods. When they created Earth, they gave birth to the younger gods, men, dwarves, everyone, and then they went away. Correct, Orvig said, but what of the younger gods? There are 10, Rathe said impatiently, one for each of the heavenly spheres. Let's count. Kolkum, who is the sun, Helion, the nearest to its fires, Aquila, the evening star, Thera, that is the earth, Azrael, who is the red planet, Marif, the world of many moons, Safrini, the ringed planet, and Yoth-Sogoth and Kosogoth, the unseen pair. I'm guessing the missing 10th god that not on the list here is the moon. And Yoth-Sogoth and Kosogoth, the unseen pair. Rathe grinned. Unseen till your kin showed us how to grind lenses to make telescopes. Orvig nodded, pleased. His clan, the Chukli, or stone melters, made many of the strong acids used in lens crafting. But what has any of this to do with my parents? Patience, boy. What are the gods now? Orvig countered. The devastation happened, Rathe said. There was a war among the gods, echoing the war of men. Kolkum, the Shadow King, betrayed his brothers and sisters. Some fought or tried to escape, but they weren't strong enough, and the Shadow King trapped their essences in mystic orbs. I wonder if... Yes, okay, Kolkum is the sun. Only the goddess Thera did not waste her energy trying to flee or battle him. Instead, she worked her own magic to change his spell. So when they were trapped, the orbs that held them flew from Kolkum's grip, and escaped into the heavens. And forever after... Rathe paused and looked Orvig in the eye. Forever after, they now orbit the sun, remaining just outside his grasp. All of which every child knows. Angrily, Rathe slapped his fist on the table, sending the glass bottles and jugs dancing. Tell me, what does this have to do with the ring and my mother? Why didn't you tell me about the ring? Aye, you have a right to be angry, maybe, Orvig said. But I made a promise to your father. He paused, as if unsure how to continue. Alright. As you say, the younger gods were bound in the orbs, all save the Shadow King. But though they have little power, these imprisoned gods are still worshipped by a few folk, who keep the ancient faith alive and hope for their return. When the gods return, Rathe quoted, but it's just a saying. Almost no one follows the old faith anymore. Almost no one, agreed Orvig. Your mother was an exception. He looked at Rathe. She was a priestess of Thera, boy, strong in her faith, a healer, and maybe more. She came here from another keep, I think. Perhaps she sought converts. In any case, she found one. Your father, Clave. Or perhaps it was simply love that made him follow her away, for they soon married. What happened to her? Rathe asked quietly. He'd known his mother was different, but few of his father's age would talk about her. He'd always assumed that she'd been disliked or simply distrusted as an outlander from another keep. Now he wondered if it had been something more than that. Fort Thunder. When you were a year and a month old, Ray had a vision of some sort, Orvig said. I don't know the details, only what your father told me. That she felt a calling and heeded it. A calling and heeded it. I realized I slurred that a little more than normal. He sighed, and whatever road she took, she could not risk an infant there. She begged Clave to stay behind and raise you. She begged Clave to stay behind and be a fucking father to you, but no. But he would not leave her side. Where they journeyed, I cannot say. They left me behind. They did not want to take you into danger, Orvig corrected him softly. I still recall the last words Rathe said to me. I ask you to keep Rathe safe until we return, and I ask this favor not just as a parent, but as priestess. And then she gave me a ring, saying, he is the last bit of the old blood. If I fail, then his time may come. But your father said, pray it does not. Orvig shook his head. I know he didn't want you following them on some wild quest before you were ready. Some damn fool crusade. Then Rathe kissed you, and they left Stonekeep, and vanished into the forest. I never saw them again. No doubt they died in the Outlands. Sorry, a little more comforting than that. No doubt they died in the Outlands. Whatever, that's the line. Rathe nodded. He looked at the ring, then slipped it into his pocket and left the room. Outside, the clouds were already stained red by the setting sun. Although he was tired and his wound was starting to ache, Rathe took the time to inspect the defenses Tam had erected. They seemed sound enough. Since the Whispering Death seemed nocturnal, they hoped, they would spend all night in the West Tower with the gates shut, windows barricaded, and weapons at hand. One person would always be awake, and a fire would be lit at all times with torches ready. Dusk came quickly. The surviving soldiers and Orvig took their meal together, more of Quinn's stew, and prepared to sleep. Quinn had first watch. Hope those cursed mutants fear flames, said Lorik. He waved the torch skeptically and shook his head. Sorry, I did that a little more cocky than I meant. Huh? We'll go with more skeptical. Hope those cursed mutants fear flames, said Lorik. He waved the torch skeptically and shook his head. Most animals do, Rathe said. He forced a grin. Singe their wings right off. Lorik nodded. Maybe so. Try to get some sleep. Good night, sir, said Quinn, echoed by Tam and Lorik. Orvig sat on a bench in the corner. The dwarf had said he'd take the first watch with Quinn. Rathe had volunteered to stand an ordinary watch, but Tam, and the others, had convinced him otherwise. You're in command, boy, Orvig had said. But you are half dead. You'll need your wits about you tomorrow, runes or no runes, when we sorry fools want to know what to do. Now sleep! Rathe curled up in his blanket. There was little left of the night, and Rathe was not sure he could sleep. He knew he had to make a decision. Should they return to Stonekeep and report the creatures, the Whispering Death, or hunt for Jen, and, Rathe admitted, try to find the mysterious green-eyed woman? Kel, the woman he owed his life to. He glanced up from his blanket and out the window, where Quinn stood guard. A full moon stared back, surrounded by the autumn stars. He would sleep on it. Apparently, it's a full moon 3 nights in a row. Okay, because it was a full moon when they were attacked, and then he was out a night and a day, or a day and a night. Because, yes, a day and a night, because it was at dawn, so then a second night of full moon, and then this third night of full moon, so... Okay, I don't know how the moon works, but apparently it's a bound god, so maybe it doesn't follow quite the same rules. Anyway, that bit of astronomical nerdery aside, that has been Chapter 2 of Thera Awakening. I'm enjoying this. I'm stumbling over my R's something fierce with Orvig. So... Other than that, I think we're doing great. I'm having a good time. And I hope you are too. If you're enjoying it, give it a thumbs up. Follow if you're not doing so already, because remember, subscribe. We're on YouTube. I've been doing a lot of Twitch lately. Subscribe, because after this we are going to be playing Stonekeep. I don't think I actually said that last episode. I just heavily implied it. Yes, we're going to play Stonekeep. It's going to be my first time playing the game when we're done with this book. There's 7 chapters and an epilogue, so, you know, there's 7 videos that are going to come out, and I hope you enjoy them as well. So let me know what you think. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.com/boaterbug, support at Patreon and Ko-Fi.com/boaterbug, and watch live at Twitch.tv/boaterbug. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a good one, and I will see you next time as we read Chapter 3 of Thera Awakening. Bye, everybody!